what I even said sometimes.
So start and recording. Perfect. All right. And then we're just waiting for Jenna, and I think we'll take it away. How are you, Brittany?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I was just telling Terry as we were talking about her video, my kids just got home from the bus and so it's like, shh.
Exactly. And
I'll
how
let you in an hour.
exactly. And how often are they in school now? Is it a couple
just this week? We live in a different school district, but just this week they went back 4 days.
4 days. Oh wow, that's nice.
It's a big deal. This is almost, and it's a little limited on time, but it's definite improvement. So that's
cool. Is that going to continue now that the governor has said we're going into high risk on Friday?
We don't ask many questions, Terry. You just
I understand.
And you adapt. That's how we roll.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay.
It's a very good question, though. Very fair.
Thank you.
All right. And I guess let me ping Jenna.
How have you been, Terry?
I've been great. How about yourself?
Good. Sunshine, gardening a lot, that kind of thing.
In fact, I just finished mowing a couple of my lawns. So
nice. Oh, good work.
Thank you. I had an hour between my last project and this one, so I figured I could get 2 of the lawns mowed real quick.
Yes, that's one thing I love about working from home is I can take a quick 15 and like go weed or plant something. It's
exactly nice. It's nice.
Hey there, I apologize for my tardiness.
You're right on time.
Are we broadcasting or just recording?
Both.
Okay, awesome, wonderful. I just was gonna say an committee related thing. Brittany, by any chance, did you walk your dog in the alley behind?
I recognized you. I have glasses on.
I was like, I'm pretty sure that was Brittany, but I'm very distracted and I was trying not to spill my coffee. And then I thought, okay, I think I'm going to see her on Tuesday. So I will apologize for that funny look. That was that moment of recognition but when you were talking to your pup, it startled me because I'm usually alone and I was way lost in thought. And so my sincerest apologies for the less than warm welcome.
Oh, no problem. But I was wearing my glasses, which I don't normally wear. And then also was in my dog parent walking outfit.
You were totally fine. Everything was lovely. I just was very much lost in work thought process. And like I said, I didn't even hear you behind me, which is clearly not good personal safety as I'm walking down that alley. And as I'm opening the door, it startled me. And then as it's closing, I was like, wait a minute, I think that was Brittany. So my apologies.
You guys must live in the same neighborhood.
I was headed into work. So I was down here at A Street and there's just like a back door that I can sneak in and out of. And
so. Yeah, we live right there, right up against the administration building. Yeah, for the schools.
Wonderful. Okay. Good stuff.
I'll probably see you in the alley again sometime.
Yes. All right. My apologies for derailing.
So just as a reminder, this is being recorded. It is a public meeting. We do have, it appears, just one attendee. People can log in and watch, which is fantastic. It's nice to easily facilitate that. And I did post the agenda in the normal ways. And let's see, very simple. I think you saw it, just the general welcome and call to order, and roll call is everyone's here. And honestly, and I think I am in note-taking and support mode, and take it away. Unless you need anything else from me, let me know.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Well, I just want to take a moment and sort of thank you both for jumping on this crazy train. I may have accidentally got us a little deeper work than I had originally thought when posing the question, but I'm really glad. I think it's important to have some clarity about how the police processes are reviewed and adopted and processed and that kind of component. So if you would indulge me, I'll take the moment and sort of just share a little bit of thought that I had around some questions, and then would love to hear what both of you sort of were thinking when you jumped in this as well. One of the things that I was hoping to have a little bit of clarity on, and then potentially have that be an opportunity for input around process for our committee, was just a little more formality around how and when we review policies. And then I appreciated, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing when and what we've reviewed recently. But I was wondering if we had ever thought about formalizing kind of like a first read scenario and then a more second read scenario, so that both the committee and the public was a little more aware of where the process was. So I know that ultimately it's not that ours is solely just feedback and recommendation, but I think if we all better understood where the process, where the policies were at in the update, draft, renewal process in a slightly more formal way, it might help the public understand when and where to engage with thoughts about those reviews. So that was really sort of what was behind my question.
Okay, so you're looking for a timeline, is that correct?
Well, I think that maybe one of the things was that we could present a timeline to our committee partners,
right.
But also so in my short time that I've been sitting on this committee from the school district's perspective, we've seen policies come before us, and I'm not sure if it's like, this is the final draft, and the department is always great about sort of sharing, like, we've incorporated these updates here and there. But I was thinking about it from a public perspective. So if I was a member of the public and didn't have the opportunity to necessarily see every single meeting, it would be helpful to identify where the policy was at. So if it's a first read, so that's like the draft form, feedback when needed, and then more of a second read. So in our agenda, it would clearly articulate where the policy is, so that the public could come and say, okay, so what was incorporated from the discussion from the last time, or from the questions that the committee brought forward that the public shared with committee, or those types of things. That was, I'm a system nerd, and so I like that kind of process piece. That was really what was behind it, was just a clarity for the public on when and how they'll be reviewed, and when and how feedback opportunities are. Thoughts on that?
I think that's excellent. And even from my standpoint as a new committee member, it's sometimes hard for me to follow. Like, I messed that up in the last meeting, which was totally my bad, of like what point we are in the review process, just because I'm kind of jumping in, and having that kind of tracked and spelled out, I think would be helpful for definitely the public and also committee members too. So we can kind of be like, oh yeah, we talked about this. And especially maybe even for people who've been on the committee for a while too, like, oh yeah, we talked about this 2 years ago, maybe we reviewed it, and now we're doing it again with this new legislation that's passed, or something like that. And having it written out, because I know we talk about that in meetings too, and people can go back in the minutes and stuff, but having like maybe even something that's posted online. I don't know if that's too much to maintain, but could be a good thing to have posted too.
The other sort of point of clarification or clarity for the public, and again, the department does an excellent job. I'm thinking through the lens of what we do at the school district, is when we put forward the policy with the first read, it's the dirty policy. So what that means is it is marked up. So we have strike throughs where the language is changing, and it provides the board, which again is a different structure than we have here, but it's an opportunity for us then to see where it's changed, and we can ask questions, or because it would be posted in advance of the meeting, the public could submit the questions or, contact through a process, thoughts or feedback on that. And, it's bold if it's new language and those kinds of things. So I was hopeful that maybe this group could sort of offer those suggestions to the committee in terms of, is this a way that might help us facilitate clarity for us and the public? Which I really think fundamentally is what lens I'm looking at it in terms of our work. Again, as an advisory body, it's not ours to decide, but it's ours to help explain and provide.
And to suggest.
Mhm. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a standard thing we do at my work too, is have like a track changes version essentially of a document where you can see who's commenting what. That could be really awesome too. I really like that idea, Jenna.
I think, and I would want us to be really careful because I don't know that a collaborative document would meet public meeting law, but even just when the department brought it to the committee, if it was sort of that dirty version, we'd know like this is version 2.8 and it's ready for review or public input or whatever. This is what we're taking out when we speak with other groups and sharing with them. And then it helps us also recognize that later when we see it without the changes, that's like the clean version, that's the second read basically, then we all know, okay, look, scan and make sure that what you thought was going to be in there is in there, because when we're done reviewing that one, then we're going to put that one to bed, and the committee without additional cause wouldn't necessarily bring it back up. So I don't know, again, it's a process nerd thing if that's something that everybody's open to.
Definitely open to it. It sounds like it's the same process as that we used to use at Boeing as well.
Oh, great.
That's awesome. And I'm wondering, Jessica, do you mind giving, and this is kind of like a newbie question too, of just like an overview of like how like the police advisory committee's involvement, like when a policy is being reviewed and like kind of who approves our recommendation, like just kind of the beginning to end process for that? You,
In what regard?
I guess in terms of like when SPD is like seeking our input on a policy, kind of how that works in terms of the policy's timeline, and then what the review process looks like overall, if that makes sense.
Well, to be honest, it has varied because they have come to the committee in various levels of stages of completeness, I guess is probably the way to put it. But what it seems like there has been is a receipt of input if it's in a draft form, and then trying to incorporate or at least make a decision point based on input. And some of the policy is outside of my area of expertise, and I wouldn't necessarily have been involved in any of the discussion around it, but I know that sometimes there's a reason whether a suggestion hasn't been incorporated or not. And a lot of times it seems like it goes through attorney review, and I don't know necessarily why something wasn't incorporated or not, but even if it was some comment put in there of this was of interest or this certain language, but maybe the language wasn't adopted, I would not necessarily be privy on whether the cause of that. Does that make sense? Whether it was a negotiated comment, whether it was an actual legal perspective. And so that may be something that is more of like chief or lieutenant level, because they're the ones that are having that dialogue with the city attorney, to be honest. But
that makes sense.
In regards to capturing the comments, that is something that had been evaluated, and I've been involved in the discussion of that piece of it. Oh, this came up and this was a good point. Let's add language here. Now, whether it's in the final version and the signed off version by the city attorney, that I hadn't tracked specifically. And I could, to be honest, I just hasn't been part of my role.
Totally. That's helpful. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I know I'm sure there's so many people reviewing everything before it gets to the final. State.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I am part of a lot of the process, but not all of it, because there is that, I mean, there's, and to be honest, I should have been prepared for this piece of it, but it is outlined in the GO and in the policy as well as union contract, but there is process in regards to posting of policy changes for contractual obligation with the union, which makes sense. And then there's also the additional piece of passing or being approved from a city attorney perspective as well. So there's it is a unified effort, I guess, to get a finalized updated policy.
The other question that I posed that I think that brought us here was sort of just the regularity at which they are reviewed or updated. And I think that's just based on my limited understanding, so correct me if this is wrong, so much is dependent upon outside factors, legislative changes, and new best practice nationally, and all of those kinds of things. I'm just wondering, and I know that Lieutenant Crowley shared last time that they all get to review them every year. And so I just am wondering from you all, with what regularity do you think it would be appropriate for this committee to commit to a regular sort of just review? And I don't necessarily think that that's like a wholehearted at every committee meeting kind of like let's review every policy, but if the expectation of command staff is that they have a familiarity, and if it's our goal to be informed on the policies, what is a good expectation for this committee's commitment to review with any kind of regularity? Biannually, annually?
Good question. It's a really good question.
I mean, it's not like we all need more reading, and I feel like it's a responsibility that if we're going to help sort of provide that voice and an opportunity to solicit feedback from the community, we should know what we're talking about. And I am a victim of that. I mean, I'm a victim. I'm probably an offender is a better word of not being super familiar with them. But I thought maybe we could propose and take it back to the committee for greater discussion. What kind of regularity we thought?
That's a great question. I made like a brief list of policies I'm interested in reviewing, like specific ones, and each one. So when I was doing my kind of prep for this meeting, I went through and looked at the policies that I was interested in, and none of them are super lengthy, like in and of themselves. Like, of course, though, if to review all the policies is like a ton, but I don't think I saw any that were really more than like 5 pages in length, which isn't too bad. So I'm wondering if we could maybe come up with a system where it's maybe even like a standing agenda item where we have a policy that we're talking about on the agenda each month. And so it's not kind of like all at once, but then I think in general, maybe we should have a process for how we select those policies that are reviewed annually. Like maybe that's a larger committee discussion too, of like, and I can share my list with folks if we were to do that. But yeah, have it be like
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, just like an annual process where we kind of all decide and then kind of plan out the year based on the committee's decisions. Yeah, sorry, Terry, go for it though.
No, I'm sorry. Now, all of these policies are not all reviewed at once. Is that correct? Yeah, so each one would be due at a different time.
Yes, yeah.
So that helps us with timing of the policy. You want to do the nearest one first, and figure out. You know, it may take us a couple of policies to really get this process down, But I think taking the first one or two policies that are coming up and figuring out how we want or how we would suggest implementing the changes in that might be helpful, and taking it back to the committee so we can get their feedback on how that works. Just as a suggestion.
I think that's awesome. I actually was thinking kind of twofold. I think that there is sort of a responsibility of members of the committee to be familiar with the policies. And so I think that my first layer was sort of a question around with what frequency would we ask that the individual members review the policies, so that they, whether they're up for amendments or changes or all of those kinds of things, further discussion, etc., but that there's a commitment of the committee to read through and review, kind of the same level of commitment that the command staff does, just to make sure that it is a working knowledge of the policy group. And separately, then perhaps a focus of subcommittee, however we might want to put it forward, to say these are some priority policies that we would like to pull and review, so that we can have a space for public discussion about how and why they exist as they are, where they're at in sort of the overarching timeline. Are there any new things that would be potentially impacting them? Those kinds of things, so that maybe annually a subgroup says, here's the priority policies that we would propose to the committee that we would like to publicly pull for the remainder of the year, you know, so for the arc, so that it's sort of like a work plan, so that we're not looking at 61 policies. I think separately we should be aware of the 61 policies, and then as work, pull them and ask subject matter experts from the district to share with us how and why those policies exist. Are there any questions? I mean, I don't necessarily think that it is a proposed changes on every single policy that we pull, but I think that there is an opportunity to provide public space to both review and better understand, and provide an opportunity for the public to review and better understand, and then provide input if there is the potential for suggestions. And then annually, like, that could be something that comes up. So next year, whatever subcommittee version this looks like would then come back to the committee and say, okay, for the upcoming work plan, in addition to the things that the department wants to pull forward and share with this committee, the committee commits to reviewing, you know, these however many policies is reasonable, so that the public understands, in addition to the things that will come up, because there will be legislative changes and those kinds of things that need to come to the committee, that these are going to be the focus areas, and they could be publicly posted on the committee's webpage that says, you know, for this year, these are the policies that the committee has pulled, and that's just a term we use, I apologize, but has pulled to better understand. And again, that's my systems nerd in me, so that then we can create a level of transparency and just ongoing commitment to having the public be aware, having the public provide feedback. So when we do have the opportunity for public comment at the committee meetings, at least they know, you know, sort of the scope of the committee, the work of the committee, the focus of the committee. Obviously, they can bring forward anything that makes sense for that committee to hear, but they also can be actively engaged in the work. Does that?
That makes sense, yes.
Yeah.
And with that, I would love to hear what you pulled. What were some of the ones? Yeah. What were some that you wanted to focus on?
There was a couple. So I've been kind of I've listened to the city council meeting last night too, and was just like reflecting on that. But I have a quick, and I'll totally happy to share my list. I have a quick question, Jessica. Sorry, I keep asking questions. I have one more. Is there? So I think one thing that would be helpful when like our feedback is requested? Is our feedback always requested at the draft phase of things, or if like a policy is being like reviewed by SPD, are we always looped in to the draft version? Like, or I think you said that we're brought in at different points, but maybe there's a way to make that more consistent too for us.
I'm sure there is. My experience, and to be honest, I think I'm 2 years into being the liaison. Do you know what I mean? So it sounds like, it feels like I'm super solid, but
Exactly.
I'm not saying, I just
in
want to
you.
clarify that I am new-ish as well. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't have this extensive experience. I just know what I know.
Totally.
But I think when I say about the varied stages of it, there have been certain instances where there were statutory requirements. Yes. So in those instances, I have to say that there were just changes made because it was a statutory requirement change, but we wanted to make sure to revise them and highlight where those changes were incorporated.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that's just like one example that came back to me is there was no hesitation in the sense it was very clear what needed to happen. Maybe there could have been varied input on verbiage or something like that, but really the intent of it would have been very clear. Does that? So things that were in more development stage, or to my recent recollection, had been brought forward in the draft stage when they knew, like, so use of force came forward, body cameras came forward, those types of things. I'm trying to think of other examples of there was like a distinct draft phase where there was input solicited. There was one where it was like an existing policy that we came back and just said, is this still right? So
got it.
There's instances of that we're not sure we should change it, but it's like we want to check in because this is a current topic and are we still on track?
Okay.
That I don't know where that would fall in it other than it's it's a current topic that just deserves a check-in, not necessarily a draft stage.
Yes.
So
I see the nuance here for sure.
Okay, I was just trying to, like, it's not an easy, straightforward.
Yes.
There are varying purposes and reasons to check in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's helpful. That's super helpful clarification for me too at this point. And maybe that's something we talk about with the larger committee too, of like, do we want to write this out how we think it should go, or that kind of thing. But that's helpful too, in understanding kind of the different, like scenario A goes like this and scenario B goes like this and scenario C. That makes sense.
Yeah. And can I tell you, I am also a fellow process person, like really like it written down. I like things to fall into standardized categories and processes. And I have tried to identify areas where we can do some refinement within my capacity. So I am excited about these discussions because we do, I don't know, we just want to do a good product and make this as efficient for you as possible. So it's sometimes difficult to categorize these, but I think if there's some predictability in certain scenarios, and then we can identify maybe what type of description or language could be added upon just to provide some clarity in the expectation of it. And like looking back to it, maybe just, this is a check-in, this is a known draft, this is simple review. However you want to do it, I'm happy to adapt the description and categorization. Does that make sense? To make it predictable.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And the other thing I think that the lieutenant touched on super briefly about policies that I think is an important component of the conversation is that there are, confidential police policies. Like, so there's different processes dependent upon the policy. And I think that just having that conversation in the public forum is what my hope is to just really truly provide this space so that you're peeking behind the curtain and the public can see how policies move forward. I don't think we need to be over prescriptive around, oh, it has to come forward this way and it has to come forward this way, that kind of thing. I just think that I would like to create the space to have some regularity and some real clarity for our community. I think that everybody benefits when it's understood that they're being discussed, that these policies are being discussed, and this is how it would move through that. So that, not to belabor it, but I think that I don't want Jessica, you to hear that it's like, oh my gosh, spend all this work coming up with this awesome flow chart.
Exactly.
I don't think that any of the three of us are gonna make you put together a flow chart. I think that just the opportunity to help our community understand that both the purpose of the committee, what it is and what it isn't, and how they can engage in those conversations.
Yeah, I think you're right on.
All right, Brittany, lay it on us.
Oh yeah. Okay. One thing I was wondering, one thing that came up yesterday in City Council was like giving condolences if there's somebody who dies or is like severely injured. And I'm not sure, like, so I have reviewing the death injury notifications or community relations policy to kind of talk through that. I have a whole communications with persons with disabilities could be a really good one for us to talk about. Uniform policies, career in-service trainings or training programs policies, employee wellness. I flagged prohibited camping because I know that was actually one that was like a legislative update I saw come through. So that might be one that SPD brings up to us because that recently, guidelines around that recently changed, I saw. Canine Unit one could be an interesting one to explore. And then we've kind of done body worn cameras, use of force more recently, but I think the business card policies is one that's pending. Is that right? Okay.
And it should be on the next. And so it's, yes, it should be on the next round. It actually was incorporated into the code of conduct policy and segment within it. But yes, yes. To be honest, I was looking back through and I don't know if they knew where it was going to be incorporated, you know, but that's what I recently learned. So that will come back through.
Great.
Policy, then not its policy on its own.
Sorry, Terry, that I couldn't hear that. What was that?
I said it's part of another, that is part of another policy, not a policy on its own.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd be happy. I can, and Jessica, if it's helpful, I can send you my list too, if that's just my suggestion.
That would be very helpful, really.
Yeah.
I just rattled those off, and I can put it in an email too. But I wrote down the little numbers to the policy numbers.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Jessica, can I ask a question about resource for this community or for this committee in terms of the department's expectation? So I'm guessing it might be a different subject matter expert for canine than community relations and those kinds of things. Is there an expectation that how do you work with the unions and things like that? Or would it just always be the lieutenant or acting chief that would present these? What is the department's thoughts on that? Is that who presents this? If the committee was like, great, here's the 9 policies, 12 policies that we would like to pull for this coming year, how do you guys present that?
It's a good question. We have brought in, I think a good example would be, there was a significant change in a policy. They would bring in the individual who kind of oversaw that policy change. Of course, it's not one person making the change, but it might be one person assigned to lead that effort. And I think in that instance, that individual would likely be brought in, and we know in advance so that we can plan that, or, to be honest, schedule overtime, because it depends on whether it's a callback or if there's minimum shifting considerations, we might have to hold someone over, but that's okay. But we have done things like that. And sometimes if it's more of, it's been a collective review and it might just be the command staff who's attending because of they're just as equipped and informed and knowledgeable as everyone else. So it likely depends. And I think that requests could be accommodated, but sometimes there is some scheduling considerations. They're not predictable. First Thursday of every month for us is quite great. And those with rotating shifts that work graveyard don't appreciate that as much, so.
Yes, that's kind of where I was trying to make sure that we're not over committing without permission.
Right. No, I think, to be honest, though, it'd be one of those, like a good example is that there is a canine sergeant and they would clearly have somebody who that individual would have significant input and insight into that policy. However, Lieutenant Crawley is that sergeant's supervisor.
Perfect.
So, it honestly depends on the circumstance and maybe the effort on that policy review or that policy initiative, who would be a more appropriate contact for you. Does that make sense? Or if, so it just, I just use it as an example. I don't know. I think that the department has been trying to be very, I don't know, we're just practical in that sense that we'd want the more appropriate person to be available. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did I capture 9? Did I get all your list, Brittany? I know you were going to share it. Was 9 roughly what you had pulled?
4, 5, 6, 8, 9. Yeah, 9, exactly. Spot on.
I tried to scribble
There was
with
a
my
different
phone.
either or. Yes,
You.
yeah, I saw that. Not fun. But yeah, and some of them like either or, like depending on what the committee thinks like makes the most sense. Like, so some of them were kind of similar. But yeah, I'll send the list too, where I kind of divide them up that way.
So in an effort to honor everyone's time, I'm wondering, I like that list. My proposal might be that that is roughly a good number for this committee that is going to work on different regularity of meeting times and frequencies to start to kind of bite off. And so maybe we share that list with Jessica and she can share it with command staff there as a potential proposal for discussion at the next meeting. I would say that maybe we defer to the department unless we have really strong feelings about any of those, and maybe we let the committee know which ones we're looking at, and then we let in absence of any really strong feelings, then we let the department sort of prioritize based on what they know their workload is and everybody whose subject matter experts workloads are, and future legislation that is underway right now in the legislative session and all of those things. Let them provide us with that timeline of how they could be reviewed in the next year. How does that sound?
I think that sounds great.
Yeah.
And if you all are okay with it, I would be happy to sort of put together just words on paper and share it with Jessica and this committee to be included in the upcoming meeting about sort of the proposal that it just become part of the process that a subcommittee annually looks at and proposes, maybe what do we think about 5 to 12 policies? I think that anything more than that is probably unrealistic.
Kind of overwhelming.
Annually that a subcommittee could pull together, and the subcommittee of the future can decide sort of what makes sense if there's an opportunity as this committee evolves for some public input on policies that come forward, because I don't think that the work of any of this precludes the department's need to move forward policy. So just that, again, the intent would be to pull the policy, to have further discussion and better understanding about it in the public meeting, not necessarily to change or update, but to suggest updates as appropriate following that sort of public conversation.
Agree.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jessica, are you going to send me hate mail because now I'm giving you a lot more work?
Oh, no, never. Never. I am, nope, I'm here to help. And I just want to make sure that I understand. So from a public meeting perspective, I kind of have two questions or two comments, I guess, is for the public meeting piece of this meeting to accomplish the public meeting requirement, since we are doing the recording, it's recording or minutes. And I was like, well, we're going to record it regardless, because why not? And then based on the discussion, I'll see if minutes make sense. Because of the back and forth, to me, it just doesn't make a ton of sense, especially since there's going to be kind of a it sounds like more of a summary recommendation piece out of it. So make sure that that is reasonable, that I intend to post this as the minutes, or you know what I mean, as the representation of
Right.
the recording itself. And then from there, I just want to clarify my role in preparation of the upcoming meeting of how this should be, how I can properly support this discussion when it goes to the meeting. Does that make sense? So I guess I can do a quick recap, is that within business of the committee at the upcoming meeting, we'll make sure to list this committee's meeting as a topic. And that Brittany's going to forward me the referenced policies numbers. I can make sure to get those in a list format so that they're available, and I'll probably include some links so that they'll be easy to identify. And that Jen's going to forward I'm going to call it more of a summary document, but basically some language in regards to initial recommendation or additional proposal for review and comment for future handling of policy review.
Right.
Fair?
Right.
Okay.
I think that
Anything
you have
else?
captured it perfectly.
Anything else from me though, in that regard? Okay.
I don't think I heard anything else for you, Jessica. Thank you for all your help.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I
You
really
do such a
appreciate
good job.
your help with my questions. Yes, actually, I
No,
know you do a
anytime.
lot as an expert, and I appreciate your honesty and transparency, and sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Yes,
Oh,
she certainly does.
Anytime. So, okay. No, it's very, like I said, I appreciate definitions, so that's great. Anything further?
I am wondering, Terry, what is your dog's name? Because I saw them make an appearance and they were very, very cute. And then now that we've finished our business, I would love to. We just got the dog that Jenna met is our new puppy, and so I have a little bit of dog fever right now. I have to say,
Well,
oh, my goodness.
This is Ming the Terrible. And Ming is a Chinese crested, and his tongue hanging out. His tongue is usually hanging out.
I saw his tongue hanging out earlier and it was so stinking cute. I have to say, well, thank you for sharing. Sorry to get us off track. That was my important question. I say
He's pretty famous around the Washburn area.
oh, keep my eyes out. Thank you.
All right.
That was excellent.
So you got a new puppy? I'm now off track too. What'd you get?
Yes, I did. She's sleeping. She's over on the couch sleeping with me.
Oh,
Tiny little thing.
She's little. She's only about 18 weeks, so she's a
oh my goodness. And what kind is she?
Baby.
We don't really know. The vet thinks she's like a Doberman mix, maybe some
Okay.
American Pit Bull Terrier, maybe some Lab. We're not sure.
So she's gonna be a big girl.
Perfect.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
she's so sweet. We love her. So
Oh, that's so cool.
got lots of training. She keeps us very busy right now. Lots
Yes.
of training walks, and
Yes,
we're very much in love.
Awesome.
they're fun.
We are so fun. Well, thank you all. This has been really nice to
Thank
connect
you.
with.
Yes, it's very good. Thank you.
I know, and I will keep my eyes peeled for your dog walking out there. So next time I won't jump and spill a coffee and startle you.
Sounds
Right.
Good
Thank you
story.
so much. Thank you, Jessica. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Thanks, Jessica.